Hey guys, and welcome back to another lesson. Today I'd like to show you a simple idea called tonicization, which can lead to very sophisticated sounding chord progressions. For example, something like this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to basically present the idea itself, talk about the theory a little bit, it's not complicated, and then I'll show you two examples of how to use it. A simple one and then a more advanced one like the one I played at the beginning. Okay, so let's start with the concept itself. Tonicization is also called secondary dominance, and it's the following idea. Basically, it's that you can precede any chord, a major or a minor, with a dominant seventh chord that is a perfect fourth below it. Okay, let's see what this means. Let's say that you have a C major chord. The chord or the note that is a perfect fourth below it, that is 5 semitones below it, is G. And the way you see this is you start with C and you count 5 semitones down, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and you get to a G. And this means that wherever you see a C major, you can precede it with a G dominant seventh chord. Let's do another example. Let's take D minor. So, starting from a D, you go a perfect fourth down, so 5 semitones, let's count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, which is an A, and this means that I can precede the D minor with an A dominant seventh chord. Now this seemingly simple idea can help you create pretty advanced sounding chord progressions. Let me give you two examples, and we'll start with a simple example. Let's take a simple chord progression, which would be a C major, going to an A minor, going to an F major, going to a G major. So, and let's start adding these secondary dominants. Let's start by tonicizing the progression. And let's start with the A minor. So for A minor, if we go down a perfect fourth, we count down 5 semitones, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, we get to the E, and this means that we can precede the A minor with an E dominant 7. Now, I'm not going to use the root position like this, I'm going to use this voicing for the E dominant 7. And the chord progression will now sound like this. Not bad, pretty interesting. Let's take it one step forward. Let's look at the F chord. Well, if we want to add a secondary dominant to it, then starting from the F, we go a perfect fourth down, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 semitones, and we get to a C, and this means that we can precede the F with a C dominant seventh chord. Of course, as before, I'm going to use a different inversions of this chord. I'll use this C dominant seventh variation, and the chord progression will sound something like this. And finally, we can also add a secondary dominant to the G major. So G, down a perfect fourth, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that would be preceding it with a D dominant 7. And I can even make it a D dominant 9. And now the full chord progression will sound like this. Now I'm sure some of these additions sounded maybe more pleasing to your ears, some sounded less pleasing. You don't have to use them, it's just an idea that you can use. In fact, as with all things in music, if you overuse it, then you'll end up boring yourself and the listener. So use it sparingly. When it actually adds to the music, experiment and see whether the added secondary dominant contributes to the progression or detracts from it. Let's take another example, and for this example I switch to an electric piano. And in fact, what I'm going to do, this might be surprising at first, but I'm going to play the exact same chord progression. C, A minor, F major, G major, and C. And I'm going to add pretty much the same secondary dominants as I did for the previous simple quote-unquote example. The only difference now will be that I'll be using more sophisticated chords with tensions and so on. But the idea of secondary dominance and of tonicization remains the same. So I'm going to start by taking my C major, and I'm going to play a C major 9 for this, let's say, and my next chord will be an A minor, but I'll add an E dominant 7, just like I did with the previous example. This is a tonicization or a secondary dominant of the A minor. I'm using a particular voicing of the E dominant 7, which also has the flat 9 and the flat 5 in it. It's fairly straightforward for you to just learn what it looks like and then copy it for your own playing. This leads into an A minor 11. Now the next chord that the A minor leads into is an F major, but again I'm going to tonicize it by adding a C dominant 7. And in this particular case, I'll add a voicing that has the 13th degree here and the flattened 9 degree here, and lead into the F major, which is an F major 9 with an added 13th, and looks like this. The F major needs to lead into the G major, but as before, I will tonicize it and add a D dominant 7 before the G. And again, I'm going to flatten the 9 and flatten the 5. So this is the flat 5, this is the flat 9. And it's actually the same voicing as I used for the E, just transposed down 2 semitones. And then I will lead into a G, which I'll actually play as a G9 sus4. And then go back to the C major 9. So putting everything together, C, secondary dominant, A minor, secondary dominant, F major, secondary dominant, G, and back to C. Now, of course, some details are omitted. For example, in this lesson, I'm not addressing exactly how to build these more, these dominant chords with tensions in them. So that will await another lesson, but I hope that at least I've shown you a pretty cool idea, which is really simple in its base form, just adding a dominant that is a perfect fourth below when you're leading into a major or a minor chord, and just adding these chords and making your progression sound richer and have more motion and so on. You don't have to use it all the time. In fact, don't use it all the time. But every now and then, in particular spots, it can really take a boring chord progression and add interest to it. That's it. I hope you've learned something interesting today, and I'll see you next time.